HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Dine in Brooklyn is a 10-day event featuring restaurants in the greatest borough on planet Earth. Learn more at dineinbk.com and discover the best of Brooklyn's restaurants Monday, March 20th through Thursday, March 30th.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. We're a member-supported food radio network broadcasting over 35 weekly shows live from Bushwick, Brooklyn. Join our hosts as they lead you through the world of craft brewing, behind the scenes of the restaurant industry, inside the battle over school food, and beyond. Find us at heritageradionetwork.org.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Kris Mattewson, proprietor and winemaker at Bellwether Wine Cellars. We'll talk to Kris about wine from the Finger Lakes region. We'll talk about Bellwether Wine Cellars and maybe talk a little hard cider too. This is the Finger Lakes Wine Show. Kris is going to school us on the Finger Lakes. We'll also taste the 2014 Bellwether Sawmill Creek Vineyard dry Riesling for our weekly wine sip. And Kris also snuck on the bus a couple other bottles of wine, so we'll be tasting a few other things during the weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Kris Mattewson hails from the Finger Lakes wine region of upstate New York. He is the proprietor and winemaker at Bellwether Wine Cellars, producers of critically acclaimed single vineyard Riesling and Pinot Noir, and a few other things we'll talk about. Kris makes wine allowing for the true expression of Finger Lakes terroir, and he's been called the rock star of the Finger Lakes. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. He also makes a mean cider, which we'll talk a little about. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Kris.
Thanks.
Listen, before we get into everything, I want to set you up with my listeners. So I want you to tell me a little about your journey in life and in wine and how you got to where you are today, which is Bellwether, which is your own winery. But you have a pretty colorful history, you know, in the Finger Lakes with wineries and your family and all that. So, you know, try to get through that.
Yeah, you know, I never went in wanting to be a winemaker. It kind of just happened. I think growing up in the town I did, which was Hammondsport, for me, it's like the most important town in the Finger Lakes for winemaking.
Is that like the bone of Burgundy? It's like the place for the Finger Lakes?
Yeah, when I grew up there, it was. The whole town was based on wine, sparkling wine and winemaking and vineyards. And as I got a little older, that kind of fell apart, and I didn't realize it when I was growing up. But, you know, you'd wake up in the fall and you'd smell like the grapes being harvested because it's in a valley.
Literally in the air.
Yeah, it was literally in the air, and I remember tasting that stuff growing up and going to wineries and being like, why the hell are we going to a winery on a field trip? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And when I got done with high school, I went to a winery because I was like, this might be a good thing for me to be able to talk with my professors about. So your job choices as like a high school student are work at a restaurant on the lake, work as a lifeguard, or work in a tasting room.
Or leave.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah. And so I went right to a winery and said, could I have a job? And I worked in a tasting room for like a week, and I was 19. And the next, like 2 weeks later, the winemaker asked me to like help him move a barrel. And
Is the winery still there?
Yeah, so it was Bully Hill,
which has a deep history up there, right?
Yeah, which is a significant winery up there. And then he took me in and really liked me and trained me.
So a couple of weeks into just working like the tasting room of the winery, the guy's got you in the back helping him?
Yeah, the guy... like, I didn't realize at the time, but he changed my life. Like, that one little thing completely, that's what...
Is he still around?
He's still there. His name's Greg Lerner. He's he's the head winemaker and one of the owners of Bully Hill, I think. And, he took me in, made me his assistant winemaker. I worked there for 4 years throughout college, 4.5 years.
So the 4 years you were in college, you worked at Bully Hill?
Yeah, I worked at Bully Hill.
And you were doing winemaking, assisting, helping, and all of that?
Yeah. And
Summertimes?
Summertimes, I'd come back for fall. I'd come back on the weekends. I'd come back any break. I'd come back if I was in school. I went to Utica College of Syracuse, and so anytime there was a tasting,
wasn't that far away.
It wasn't that far. Or I would do all the like Central New York tastings for Bully Hill, and so I got to go out and do like tastings and talk, and that always made people happy. That like. I wasn't some like schleppy dude that knew nothing.
Right.
And then
I guess there was a lot of that up there.
Yeah, there's a lot of like just.
So
like,
you became passionate because obviously if you stuck with it year in year out, you got a good guy that embraced you. So 4 years of school comes to an end and working at what happens then?
So actually I had I was probably like most college kids. I had no idea what the hell I wanted to do with my life or what I was doing in college. And I got done and, I ended up having to move back home, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I was like, all right, I'm good at this. I'll just go see if I can get a job at the winery. And they were like, well, you really didn't, like, we offered you the assistant winemaking job, and well, you weren't really interested. So like you can work
back
here
at Bully Hill.
There's like I was dating a girl in college and it didn't work out, and I ended up having to move back home and turn down that job basically.
Right.
And then I went to another winery my best friend was working at, which was called
So wait,
Heron
Bully
Hill.
Hill resented you a little. It's like, dude, we gave you a shot. You fluffed us
it was-
off, so not now.
Yeah, and it was my fault. And I look back and I'm like, God, I wish I had just taken that job. Like I'd be doing better off.
Don't worry about that.
But and I love those guys. Like he was like a father, uncle type figure to me.
Still talk to him?
I talk to him every once in a while, and they're like really encouraging of my success, and I really appreciate what they've done for me. And but then I went to another winery, same thing. I worked in the tasting room, like I don't even think a week that time, and the people that were working the cellar were like, that kid's like completely trained, and
they knew from the Bully Hill thing?
It's a small
what place
community.
was that?
That was called Heron Hill.
Right, which is another fairly well-known Finger Lakes winery.
And at the time, it was a really significant winery. They had a really good winemaker, and he was really ambitious, and I think I took a lot of the ambition that I brought to Bellwether from him. He was absolutely crazy.
You were on the right ride with the right guy.
Yeah, I mean, and the assistant winemaker quit right before harvest, and I became like the de facto assistant winemaker, and he was just batshit crazy, the winemaker. So I was working, I was coming in at 6, going home at 2 in the morning. We'd be just like, lighting things on fire and burning stuff and making wine in between.
So you were doing everything.
We were doing everything.
So you learned everything there.
Yeah.
What was their specialty? Were they making Rieslings? What What they concentrate on?
Heron Hill at the time, the guy that I worked for, he was Hungarian, and he worked for the Royal Tokaj Company, and they recruited him to come over. And so he was really focused on making dessert wines and making, at that point too, no one had ever received a high score in any of the magazines above an 89.
So dessert wines are famous in France and in Hungary.
Yeah.
Hungary makes, what's it called, the Tokaj?
The Tokaj, yeah.
And it's a very sweet, cloying wine, but it's very well made. So he came to the Finger Lakes
he came
to make it with what grape?
With, at the time, they really didn't have any clue what to make it with here. But it was Riesling was his primary focus. And they were also making some, like, Cab Franc, which I think is kind of crazy. But, like, he did that, but he also taught me how to make like a style of dry wines that nobody else was really making.
With mostly Riesling?
With Riesling. That was, at that point...
So that was a critical sort of lesson in what you're doing now.
Yeah, and there was one night we were just there alone. It was me and him, and we had the barrel, we had the wine going, and he started his fermentations differently than I learned at other places.
So he had a different style.
Completely different style.
And we'll talk about yours later.
Yeah.
You took on a lot of that non-conventional stuff.
Yeah, and he showed me this, and it just, whatever reason, it just stuck in my head. And 2 years later, I was tasting the wines, and I was like, this is completely different, and it's awesome.
So the wines lived up to the hype.
Yeah, and I think he was a really controversial person. His name was Thomas Laszlo, and
the Mad Hungarian.
Yeah, he was literally. It was crazy. Like we could talk like 2 hours on just crazy stories about Cellar, but he trained me on this, and then. Honestly, there's a big like drinking culture in the industry too. So I ended up I left that winery because I was just like drinking too much, basically.
How long were you there?
I was there for like 2 years.
And when you talk about drinking, not just wine, like just going out after and drinking beer, vodka, whatever.
Yeah, like
okay.
I was right out of college. We have to like set kind of the tone. And
you had nothing to worry about.
I had nothing. I had like no bills.
You came home at 10 or 3 in the morning. What was the difference?
Well, there was many a days I rolled into the winery from drinking the whole night, and then and he was Hungarian, and one of the things about being Hungarian, the culture is like when you greet someone when they come in, you have a shot. And so we had like some wines that were distilled in the corner, so they were like 90 proof plus.
Oh boy. And
so every morning we would take a shot of that, and you'd start drinking by like not drinking but tasting, which you end up taking some alcohol in. And
so you realize all this, and after a couple of years, you were there at Heron Hills a couple of years?
Yeah, 2 years.
You leave, then what happens?
Then I have a degree in psychology, and I was like,
how's that going?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I should use my degree in psychology, so I did social work for like 3 months. And then I was like, forget this. I want to go back.
So you worked for like the state or a hospital or
I worked for a company that it was a private company that supplied like
That's
kids.
very funny.
Yeah. And
hey, this is my social worker, Kris.
Yeah.
He just took a shot of some Hungarian wine
seriously.
And then sat down with me.
Here's your social worker, Kris, working with kids. He needs to like dry out for a couple months before.
So that obviously that goes to the point where it didn't work out, right?
Yeah, that I almost probably about the same time as it took me from going from a tasting room to a wine cellar at any winery. It was about the time I was like, this was not a good choice. And so I ended up getting a job as a wine rep until I could get another assistant winemaking job. And that was a really good experience.
So wine rep sales?
Yeah, so I ended up,
Finger Lake Wineries?
No, it was actually like small family-owned California wineries. This was in...
anything of significance
today? Like Hall, Bon
Yeah.
Cristiani.
Good stuff.
Yeah. We had this brand called Sensorium, which I really liked, which was John Ritchie.
So that was sales. What was the region up there?
It was... the company was me and the guy who owned it.
Right.
And I could go wherever I wanted in upstate New York and sell wine.
How did you do and how did you like it?
I did really well.
Okay.
But
you didn't love it.
I realized like what I would do is when I would be out and the sales reps in upstate New York are a little different, and I'd be looking around and there'd be like the Empire and Southern guys coming in their suits, and just you could tell they were not excited about their lives like toward the end of their careers, and I did really well at it, and I was being asked to work for some other bigger companies.
But that's not the path you want.
And I was like, I want to be making something. I want like a job that I can really.
But that background has to help you owning your own winery, with your own distributor or how you perceive sales, right?
It helped out a ton. Like, I helped out a ton, honestly, like working in the tasting rooms. I worked in retail during these periods of time too. And doing the winemaking background, it gave me a really rounded kind of experience.
Right.
And I think, a lot of people just go and do winemaking and they don't realize, like, you have to sell this, and how are you going to sell it, and what's different about your product.
You can't be in some wine cellar 24 hours a day with no tan and no clue.
Exactly. And when I went back, I was like, I want to go in the wine cellar. I don't want to talk to anyone. I just want to focus on
So
wine.
how long did you do the selling and stuff for?
I did that as well, only like 6 to 8 months. And I interviewed for that job and an assistant winemaking job within a week of each other. And it took the winery like 7 months to decide.
So that kind of worked out. So where'd you wind up?
I ended up working at a winery called Swedish Hill, which is another like large winery,
well known.
Yeah, and the reason I ended up
places.
it was good, and they were all big. And then to have that experience to go back to a small winery was really cool. But the reason I ended up there was one of my best friends, who was the assistant winemaker at Heron Hill. Right before he left, he went to Swedish Hill, and so he brought me over at that point, and I was working I was still working the cellar like on weekends at Swedish Hill that year before.
What
I went
was
back.
there? Were they Riesling and what were they making?
They were everything.
They were
anything that was great.
Were they making the Cab Francs and the Pinots?
They were making Cab Francs, Pinots, hybrids, natives,
right.
And they were also making apple wine, which was interesting. We were making pear wine. We were doing like
that stuff
fruit
sells
cordials.
In the tasting room, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like sweet stuff like that up there. And then, so that was a really good experience. And I got
How
to
long
learn.
were you there?
I was there for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, or a year and a half. And then from there I went to a smaller winery called Atwater.
Right.
And that was kind of more geared toward what I was focused on.
Was there an Atwater? Was there a guy named Atwater? Or that was just a name?
It's the name of the winery.
Right.
The family that owns it is named Marks, and the guy's name is Ted Marks. And
was Ted the winemaker?
No, Ted was like his son-in-law bought the winery and took it over, and there was kind of a fallout, and he left the winery, and then someone else became the winemaker, and then I was like the third assistant winemaker at the time, or the third person that was the assistant winemaker at the time.
How long were you there? How'd that work out?
That was good. I mean, it was really rewarding, and that's where I started Bellwether as well. But I was there for 4 years.
You made Bellwether at Atwater?
Yeah. So part of the agreement.
Were you making Atwater at some point?
Yeah, I was making Atwater.
Were you the winemaker, or you were always the assistant?
Technically, I was the assistant winemaker.
But you were doing the heavy lifting?
Yeah. So, well, as like a sous chef at a restaurant is sometimes there's different levels of sous chefs.
The chef's on TV cooking on Good Morning America, and you're doing all that.
Yeah. So I worked pretty hard there, I would say. And then part of the agreement was I couldn't make my wines during my shift. So I would start the day. And
you're working 22 hours a day.
Yeah, it was crazy. So I would literally like clean all the equipment too. So I would like start the day, clean the equipment, use the day, make Atwater wines, and then I would clean the equipment again, and then start my day for Bellwether at night again.
So the Bellwether, just let's give everyone a perspective. The Atwater and Bellwether thing, what years are we talking about now? Mid-teens?
That was 11, 12.
11, 12 was Atwater. You started doing the Bellwether thing.
I started doing Bellwether 11 and 12.
Okay.
I was at Atwater from 9 to 14, I think.
Oh, so you were there for a while.
Yeah, I was there I did the 2010, 11, 12, 13, and I think the 14 vintage.
All right, so the first vintage for Bellwether was what year release?
So we did 2011 Pinot Noir, and then we did 2 Rieslings in 2012, and we released those.
So there was an 11 and a 12.
Yeah, released at the same time, and that was something I really wanted to do because I wanted to keep the wines back a little bit before I released them. So I
Right.
wanted to make sure that the Pinot had at least a year in bottle before we released it.
Now, the grapes came from the Atwater sources, or you were going out and looking for your own sources?
There was, I mean, I'd been growing up there, and there was a lot. Like, I knew who I wanted to work with.
Right.
And actually, the way Bellwether happened was just one day, the vineyard, Sawmill Creek, which is in Hector, which is where Atwater was, they called and they're like, we have Pinot, we just handpicked. The people decided it's too much. Do you want to buy it? And offered it to Atwater, and Atwater said, like, no, we're good.
You jumped on it?
And then I was like, can I buy it? And
That's a good break.
it was crazy. It's crazy to think, like, 5 years, 6 years later, I am where I am because of that, like, one thing.
But besides the fact that by happenstance the grapes were available, did you perceive that as a good plot? And
Oh,
good
yeah.
I mean, they had it going.
Sawmill
right?
Creek was somewhere
So that
I
was a
always
lucky
wanted to-
break in every sense.
yeah, it kind of was like, honestly, Riesling's my first passion.
Right.
And I would have started with Riesling, but because that Pinot came up, I was able to get into working with Sawmill
Right.
Creek, and it was really good. It was 2 barrels. I mean, we're talking 50 cases, and we've grown.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
You got to start.
Well, before we get into Bellwether, I want to talk to you about a couple things about the Finger Lakes. So, the word terroir, is the land, the ground. Burgundy has a different terroir than Bordeaux and Napa. What is Finger Lakes terroir? What's going on there that you taste in the grapes as a region? And does it vary much?
It totally varies, and that's why I wanted to start the project too. Was when we were doing. So there's 11 lakes. There's a bunch of different soil climates. The way the Finger Lakes was formed was it was a glacial lake basically, and all the lakes aren't actually. Everyone thinks that it's from the glaciers going in and receding basically and pulling back when it got colder. They're actually old riverbeds. And because of the pressure of the glaciers, they melted the water on the bottom, and then they were riverbeds that were flowing out to the Atlantic Sea. And so there's a little bit of pulling and dropping of soils, but it's mostly because there was rivers underneath these glaciers. And the whole area at one point was a big lake also. It was like almost a sea. And so we have a lot of like fossilized deposits. So we have limestones and shales as our subsoils.
All good for wine, right?
Amazing for wine. I always say.
Now, is it isolated in certain areas, or it's distributed and it's site by site?
Well, there's like a big block of limestone that goes like kind of across New York State up into Ontario, and that's where like the people in Niagara and Niagara Escarpment have their limestone.
Right.
But then the Finger Lakes is mostly shale, which is like, I like to call it like poor man's slate, basically. If you look at it,
good minerality, right?
Yeah,
for the wines.
It's good minerality. It's really hard soil. There's 2 types of slate down there. There's black slate and white slate. Black slate's a little more pure, and it's really uncommon, actually. And there's some white slate that's really common down there, and that gives the wine some minerality. But it's really hard. But get back to it, like the Finger Lakes is huge. It's like
right.
Like to drive across the Finger Lakes takes 3 hours, and like anytime anybody comes up, they're like, "We're just going to be going to the next lake," and I'm like, "Well, then you're not going to be seeing me today because it's going to be an hour at least before you get over here."
Right.
And so I think people don't realize how big it is, and there are 11 lakes, but there's really, for me, there's 3 that are important, which is Keuka, Seneca, and Cayuga, which are the central lakes, and they're the deepest.
So help me, because I haven't been there in a long time, and you've inspired me to get up there in the next
definitely.
summer. So, but you just named 3 lakes. Are a lot of the wine making operations limited to a certain area, or are they spread out through those 3 hours?
Yeah, like the lakes too. Those are where the majority of the wineries
Right.
are. Like Seneca's in the middle.
So they're in and are those AVAs?
There's a Finger Lakes AVA, which is huge.
So tell everybody what an AVA means.
So an AVA is an American viticultural area. So it's an area recognized historically
As a wine-growing region.
Yeah. And the crazy thing for me is, like, I grew up in Hammondsport, which is on Keuka Lake with a K, and it has the most history. It has the most grapes that were grown on it. but it's not an AVA because no one's applied for it. But Seneca Lake and Cayuga Lake are AVAs, and then everything else falls within the Finger Lakes AVA.
So why don't you apply for?
Yeah, I've actually started. I've been up late at night with my kids, and I'm just typing in AVA application stuff. I've actually contacted the department in the government that does this, and I've contacted some people on Cayuga Lake that have more resources, let's say, than me, and. Because I just want to put Cayuga Lake on a label, because that's my love.
It has a very emotional attachment to you. Mm-hmm. All right, so for your wines, the sawmill stuff and all of that, you explain the terroir, shale, there's limestone and all that. What's basically going on with the vineyards that you're working with? What's the characteristics?
So the Finger Lakes it's basically every lake is a valley, and there's very different soils that go across it, but they have this big slope, and they have a lake that kind of regulates the temperature. It's really cold, too. It's one of the coldest regions to grow wine in.
Is it a shorter season because of that, or it's the same season, but the temperatures are lower?
No,
so it's a condensed season.
It's a much more condensed season, and then what people don't realize, too, is it's really hot in the Finger Lakes at the end of summer in the early, August, September. So we're talking 90s, 100s. So everything accelerates right at the end.
What does that do? Does that increase the sugar? Does that? What are the effects of a hot end of the summer on the wine?
You lose acidity for one thing really quickly,
which
and you
is not
gain
good
sugar.
For a Riesling.
No, it's not. But we have so much acidity in the Finger Lakes,
right?
That we don't have as much
because of the soils.
Because of the soils, and because it's cool, and
right.
because we have those lakes regulate temperatures throughout the day and night, which are called diurnals.
So a 94-degree day, what's the temperature at night? 60s?
It could be 60.
Could be a 30-point swing?
I've seen even bigger than that.
Wow.
I've seen 40-point swings before, which is just insane. And so that really, those things really kind of make the wine. So we have all this, particularly for the Riesling. And
because the Finger Lakes wines are known for that bracing acidity.
Yeah.
For all those reasons. All right, so that's reflected through all your wines. Now, they say that Finger Lakes is a tough place to grow grapes, and I think we just explained a little. Short growing season, a lot of heat spikes. What else? I mean, are there obstacles you deal with every day?
Yeah. You're fighting hard to make wine in the Finger Lakes. And the main thing is we have a lot of moisture there. And so we have all this heat, and then we have high rainfalls and high moisture. So more moisture
than most wine-growing regions.
I can't think of any region that has more moisture.
Right.
Because there's no airflow with those lakes with that. So when the morning comes, there's actually there's a thing on the lakes that's fog, and they call it the serpent, basically, or the snake, and it's the fog that lifts off the lakes, and it sits there for maybe an hour. But as the day goes on, all that moisture goes to the top of the hill and then falls back through, and so it gets stuck in the canopy and everything. And
so mold could be an issue.
Mold is the primary issue up there, and that's why you don't see as much organic and biodynamic.
I was
going to
ask you that because the movement towards raw, organic, biodynamic. It would be a no-brainer, but the natural circumstances make it harder, right?
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean you can't be sustainable and conscientious.
Yeah, there's a lot of sustainable stuff, and there's people moving toward biodynamic and organic. But I think the trick with that is you gotta be willing to go in and pick out your fruit almost grape by grape, and that's hard for people to accept.
Is anyone doing that? They're fuck it, we're going to be organic and just kind of fight the fight?
Yeah, I mean, and they're fighting the fight. And so Weimer they're going for full biodynamic, which is just crazy.
Planting ram's horns.
Yeah, they got their ram's horns. They've got everything. I think Weimer is always 10 years ahead of everybody else. I think that the younger people in the wine industry that are moving in are catching up, but they're always so far. And then Bloomer Creek I think they're organic, and everybody else is pretty conventional. But one way around that is we could just grow Riesling and make that botrytis a benefit to us, because botrytis wines are viewed as the best
dessert wines and all that stuff. Yeah. I'll talk to you about some other wineries later, but let's start talking about Bellwether, which is your winery. And we talked about, how you got it started. You were at Atwater, you were working at night and all of that. You're one of the few wineries that makes only a couple of varieties, or you started, Riesling and Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
We talked about some other grapes, and you are big into single vineyard designations, right?
That's right, yeah. And
Why don't other wineries, do
why
that?
aren't they jumping on it?
Or why didn't they do it?
Because the wineries in the Finger Lakes were so focused on selling their wine in the tasting room, it didn't make a lot of sense. It's actually
It
hard.
was less art and more commodity or just product.
It was just product. They had a dry Riesling and a sweet Riesling, and the reason I did it primarily is I was working in all these other wineries. We'd have 80 tanks of Riesling from different sites that were all fermented separately, and you go through and taste them, and you'd be like, we did the same thing. This tastes different. This tastes different. This tastes different. And then it would come to spring, and everyone would be like, well, which one of these is the dry ones and which one's the sweet ones? And you lose the whole identity of that site. And so when I went out, when we did Bellwether, I was like, I want to reward the growers for doing something different. And then I want to show Keuka Lake is just completely fucking different than Seneca Lake. And Seneca Lake's completely different than Cayuga Lake. And the bottom of Keuka Lake's different than the top of Keuka Lake. And nobody really kind of went at that. And one of the things in the wine industry is everybody's like, Alsace has the most diversity of terroir. There's so many different soil types. There's so much, we would blow it away in the Finger
You have
Lakes.
that much diversity.
Yeah, we have diversity.
So you can express that through the wines.
We can express that through the wines, basically.
Yeah. You kind of make wines like in the old school German way, right? How would you define that?
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of a new age wine guy, new guy on the scene, but you're embracing these old.
Yeah.
Well, what is that?
Well, and the thing is, I'm doing it. I love German wines. I basically just drink German wines, and I drink a little Austrian.
Little Gruner here.
Yeah, yeah. Because I like the style of production and the mentality.
Right.
And the first wine, when I worked in that cellar, the guy Greg, every Friday afternoon we do blind tastings, and he just loaded me up.
So he opened up your world with.
Yeah,
all
he
that.
gave me all these wines, and so we kind of try to emulate that and try to make wines basically like a German grandfather would. And you're seeing the same thing happen in Germany with wineries like Falkenstein and also Julian Hart and as well like Uli Stein as well. And they're kind of going back.
There was about a month ago. There's a guy, I forgot his last name, Stefan, does Riesling Fire. Did you come down to that?
Yeah, yeah.
There's some great growers and a big dinner. It's like the La Pauli of, Riesling.
Yes.
It's very cool, the diversity of winemakers and all that.
So Steven's actually my distributor.
Is he?
Yeah.
Is Steven Von Boden?
Yeah, Von Boden's my
I
distributor.
didn't realize that. Okay.
And that's like the biggest compliment I've ever had is him coming down and being like, I want to represent your wine. So
That's
it's
nice.
like you and all these German wines, basically.
I didn't know that
yeah.
They were connected and all of that. All right, so Riesling, great food wine, great acidity. The Pinots, I mean, you've been compared to some Jura wines and all of that.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the styles of the wines that you make? Is it based on the site or... Because I want to get into your winemaking technique, which it'll get way too nerdy for our listeners.
Exactly.
But there's so much shit going on.
The one
with
thing
what you
I was
eat, with
told-
oxygen on the
The one thing I was told is like no one knows what the hell you're talking about when you talk about winemaking, so just like keep it simple.
But like half the guys in the world don't even do what you do.
No, I mean what we do is very different, and what we do.
Why? If you embrace the old German winemaking tradition, and then when you got to making the wines, I wouldn't say experimental, but you had an idea of how you want to make wines. Like, just give me some examples of what you do that people don't do.
Like in the Finger Lakes in particular, one of the things I do is I bottle my wines really late in the year.
Right.
So like I still have a 2015 Riesling in tank that I have that is going to get bottled in the next couple of weeks. So that's two years on the lees, which everybody else bottles like now.
So you hand pick everything. Your fermentation is slow, and you bottle late.
Yeah, and and we
which
do
is
a
not
lot of
typical.
No, and I mean we use it's what I like when we started our wines in the Finger Lakes, we were completely different than everybody else. And when I released the wines initially, people were like, "You're ruining the reputation of the Finger Lakes."
So you got some shit for that.
Yeah, I was like really embedded in the winemaking culture, and now I'm like a black sheep. Like a lot of people hate me because I don't make wines in the Finger Lakes way, and because we've gotten some attention, and that was part of me being young and being like, I'm going to go out and do it my way, and I'm fucking right, and you're wrong, and I'm going to show you that I'm right.
So what's the consequence? I mean, the consequence is just local. I
Yeah.
mean, in New York, we were talking earlier, sommeliers love the wine. It's a great representation of the Finger Lakes. It's just a local political thing.
Yeah, there's like, oh man, it's very political. Like the wine industry is really incestuous in
Yes.
Finger Lakes and everywhere really. And what I did was not part of that. Was everyone was like, oh yeah, he's good, he's well trained, he has a good palate. And then I went out and I would taste the wines, and everyone would be like, they're too reductive, they're too closed up, there's not enough fruit, there's too much minerality, you need to add sugar to them. And then I would say, no, I'm not going to do that.
You're not a big sugar or sulfur guy, right?
No, I mean, honestly, I like sulfur because I think it's part of making German-style white wines.
Right.
But I've never added any sugar to any of my wines. I think that's one of the differences. Like, when I go out and do my picking, like, there's an intention of what that wine's going to be when it goes to bottle. And a lot of people pick based on the chemistry of the wine. And I don't care as much. I care more about flavor and then what the development of the wine is, the grapes are.
So your whole approach is different.
Basically, like...
so to this day, you're still getting crap up there?
Yeah.
Screw them.
Yeah.
Listen, you're on the right track. I mean, the people that know wine know you're making a good product.
Yeah, and there's a lot
And by the way, it's not like Finger Lakes was like burning a path to great wines.
No.
So, they should give you some kudos for that.
But the thing is with that, too, I learned everything I know from them. Like, I have the skills to go out and take these risks because those guys taught me the fundamentals.
Right.
And I think that's really
Everything
important.
led up to what you're doing.
Yeah.
So at Bellwether, you make, like a half a dozen or more Rieslings, a bunch of Pinots. You brought in a rosé and all of that. So you make a bunch of Rieslings, a bunch of Pinots, and you make them from, 3, 4, 5 different sites?
Yeah, it kind of shifts. We contract with the growers. We try to get really long contracts, and then I try to do at least 3 pickings from each site. So in 2015, we had 4 sites, and I did 16 pickings, and
it's a lot for up there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So even though you're an outlier and a pain in the ass and a renegade, these guys still want to sell you grapes?
Yeah, because I treat them well.
Yeah, well,
I think if you're going to do that, you got to...
And you appreciate them.
Yeah, and
they know that.
And I think, too, for a long time, nobody kind of talked about them growing the grapes. It was all about, like, what did it look like as the winemakers, like, look what I did, and then the growers are like the peasants not getting the crumbs, and I wanted to make sure the growers got some.
That's always, that's a sustainable sort of attitude, for the long run where everyone participates. All right, we're going to take a break in a few minutes, but there's a couple areas I want to cover before we break. So you are trying to make, or you're making, a sparkling wine?
Yeah.
Is it a pet nat, or is it a sparkling, or is it both?
Well, I've done pet nat, and
explain to everyone what a pet nat is.
So pet nat means pétillant naturel,
a French term.
Yeah, so naturally sparkling, basically.
Champagne is fermented twice.
Champagne's fermented twice.
And pet nat is
one primary fermentation.
Right, but it's a fizzy wine.
Yeah, it's a fizzy wine, and I kind of got obsessed with the idea in 2013 and started doing that. But part of me, too, growing up in the Finger Lakes, like the Finger Lakes was sparkling wine for the United States, like pre-Prohibition. And we kind of lost that after Prohibition. And myself and a bunch of other people are really kind of trying to embrace it now, like that we could make some of the best sparkling wine outside of Champagne, and why aren't we trying to do it?
So you want to hone in on that a little?
Yeah. So
what are the grapes?
So, I mean, I make all of mine with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, a little bit of Pinot Noir.
Like a champagne blend.
Yeah, exactly.
You could do a Blanc de Blanc. You could do a mix.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that, like, if we're doing it, there's like a standard, like a variable that's equivalent, so that you can kind of see what's different, basically.
So is this something you're going to concentrate on, and from here on in, we're going to start seeing, some sparkling releases from Bellwether?
Yeah, I mean, this actually, it's kind of funny we're talking about it, because this year will be the first release of sparkling wines from Bellwether.
Which will be what vintage year?
2013.
So, slow to pick.
Yeah.
Long fermentation.
Yeah.
Long release.
Long bottle.
At the end, we'll give everybody all the vitals, but there'll be a 2013 Bellwether sparkling wine.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's Pet Nat available as well, which is kind of just something I want to toy with. Is
Pet Nat easier and quicker to make than the sparklings, or not necessarily?
It's quicker. It's actually, like, out of all the wines I make, it's the hardest wine.
Is it?
Yeah, because it's like you're riding a wave. You got to catch it right. You got to put it in a bottle when the sugar's right. So literally, like, you're monitoring it constantly, and like, most of the time when you bottle, you prep for a little bit, but when you bottle sparkling wine, and it's in harvest typically, when you bottle Pet Nat, it's like go to bottle. You're going to bottle like 8 hours. If nobody's available, I'll bottle the thing by myself, basically. And
so down the road, the sparkling wine will be more of an effort and more releases than the Pet Nat, do you think, or not necessarily?
They'll probably be a little bit more. It's never going to be really significant,
right? Compared to everything else. Yeah. But it's something you want to do.
It's something I want to do.
Put your signature on it. And
yeah.
All of that. All right. Kris met a girl up in the Finger Lakes, and he was too shy to ask her out. So eventually he figured out, he got drunk and asked her out. I'm shortening the story. But it turns out her family was a fairly well-known cider making outfit, which carried the name Bellwether, right?
Yep.
Which you extended to your wine line. So Bellwether and New York State are pretty well known for ciders, and you've had your hand in that. So let's just talk about cider for a few seconds before we take a break. So cider is made how? Obviously with apples.
Yeah. Cider is made with apples. A lot of cider is made with concentrate apples, and then they blend water back and then do the fermentation.
You do apples? Concentrate?
We do apples, and the Finger Lakes in New York State has a long history of making hard cider. But my father-in-law really, the term Bellwether means like someone that's a leader in a group or a forethinker.
Like the lead sheep or whatever.
It comes exactly from that. Right. And I mean, he literally wrote like the federal definition of hard cider.
So he was an early, influential guy in the cider.
Yeah, post-prohibition again, when we lost post when beer became popular. But we lost all the cider. He was he's actually the first winery in New York State to apply that's a winery that was focused on making cider. There was nobody else making cider in the Finger Lakes when he did it.
What year are we talking about? Not that long ago.
1999.
But around the country, was it going on or not as much?
I mean, there was pockets here and there.
But it wasn't a full-blown thing then.
No.
So would you say the last 7-8 years the cider thing has blown up?
Yeah, it's crazy. When I met my wife, like, you could kind of like count how many cideries there were in the U.S. on your hands. And now, like, every time I go on social media or an internet or read something or go to New York, there's like a new cider, or there's like, and the thing is too,
it's like craft beer, craft cider.
Yeah,
everybody's
crazy.
Like got their
They're
hand
just in it. And actually, the town I live in now, Trumansburg, I believe we have the most cider producers in any town in the United States. Yeah, which is crazy.
So with wine, you put yeast in, and that converts the sugars to alcohol. Am I correct with that?
Yeah.
With cider, to make it hard, what are you doing with the apples to make it alcoholic?
So it's the same process.
It's yeast?
Yeah, it's yeast that's
indigenous or just added or whatever?
Some of those we use indigenous, and some we're using commercial because that's kind of like the style they had developed. And the thing for me, everybody thinks like cider and beer. And when I think about it, the first ingredient in beer is water.
Right.
and then it's grain, and you have to heat it to extract the sugars and blah, 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 and then you can ferment it. When you're making cider,
Apple juice.
the first ingredient's apples, and that's the main thing, and so it's more like wine for me, and it's more like sparkling wine. And the thing for me that's crazy is ciders are typically valued a lot cheaper than wines are, and you're working with the same products.
Effort and the
yeah.
But I got to tell you, your ciders. I mean, you make a bunch.
Yeah.
There's some cool names, some cool labels.
Yeah.
And they ain't like $7-8 a bottle. I mean, you know, they're to your point, they're crafted as well as wine.
Yeah,
and they drink like that.
And there's a big move right now in the cider industry that the thing is cider is wine, or orchard cider, or grower cider, and I think it's really good because they're embracing that they are actually a wine product and not as much a beer product.
Well, it's agricultural. It's
Yeah.
a fruit. Grapes are fruit. Apples are fruit. Just different style. All right, we're going to break. But one last question I always ask everybody. How important is social media to what you're doing? Do you use it to promote the brand? Do you use it for discovery?
Yeah. We wouldn't be where we are without social media. Like,
Do you think it helped get your name out there?
we had when we started, the wines were like a second thought, and it was literally my, like, at the time, Twitter, and now Instagram, and a little bit of Facebook, and just
So you recognized that you jumped on it.
yeah, we jumped on it.
You got all the free benefits for being proactive.
You know, and I always say this, like, we don't spend anything on our marketing budget except for me putting a pound symbol behind a Instagram thing.
Right.
So, like,
Good for you.
I can go to New York, or I can go to Montreal and eat and drink, like, and socialize, and that's our marketing budget, and that's kind of the way I'd rather.
Well, that's important.
Yeah.
You know, you're the face behind all of that. All right, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Kris Mattewson. Kris is the winemaker and proprietor of Bellwether Wine Cellars. When we come back from the break, we're going to subject Kris to our wine list. And then Kris brought a whole bunch of bottles that we've been drinking, but we're going to officially taste them on the air during our weekly wine sip. So we'll be back in a minute. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network.
Dine in Brooklyn is a 10-day event featuring restaurants in the greatest borough on planet Earth. Taking place Monday, March 20th through Thursday, March 30th, Dine in Brooklyn is celebrating the 5-star flavors that make Brooklyn a must-taste destination. From the Asian-inspired flavors at Nightingale 9 and Carroll Gardens, to classic barbecue at Mabel's Smokehouse in Williamsburg, the Brooklyn restaurant scene has something for everyone. Unwind with a bottle of vino at Soignier Restaurant and Wine Bar in Park Slope, dream of summer at Clementi's Crab House in Sheepshead Bay, or be transported to a Gothic Irish monastery while drinking a Guinness in hand at the Wicked Monk in Bay Ridge. Restaurants are offering their choice of $28 prix-fixe 3-course dinners, $15 2-course lunches, or $12 weekend brunch. Visit dineinbk.com to view all of the participating restaurants and their menus. Make your reservations now to discover the diversity of flavors that Brooklyn has to offer. Dine in Brooklyn is taking place Monday, March 20th through Thursday, March 30th. Learn more at dineinbk.com.
All right, we're back with our guest, Kris Mattewson from Bellwether Wine Cellars from the Finger Lakes in upstate New York. He got on a bus today to visit us and talk to us live. So now we're going to subject Kris to our wine list, which we ask all our guests. And Kris, don't ponder over these questions too much. Just, kind of flow through them. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? I don't mean the second, but like what's interesting you? What do you keep trying? Something new? What's on the table?
Yeah, I'm like the most boring drinker now. As I've gotten older, I just keep drinking the same thing, basically. But I drink a ton of Riesling.
German Riesling,
pretty
Austrian.
much German.
So you like to
domestic.
taste as much Riesling?
Yeah, I taste anytime I can taste Riesling, I view it as something that's important. But I drink a ton of Chablis also.
Okay.
Because the minerality and the way that they're made are really interesting to me.
So Chablis and Riesling.
Yep.
So you're leaning on those whites.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about your favorite wine and food pairing. I mean, I'm afraid of the answer, like Finger Lake answer. It's like lake trout and Cabernet Franc. So give me your favorite wine and food pairing.
I've listened to the show, and everybody says pretty much the same thing. And it's champagne and popcorn or potato chips
chicken.
For me. Yeah.
But is that you?
I love that, yeah. I mean,
so you drink champagne when you can?
If I can afford champagne, I'm going to drink it.
Okay.
And so I drink champagne, I drink Beaujolais, I drink Rieslings, and
but pair foods with me.
Yeah.
Like if the kids are asleep, you got a little date night, you're cooking, you'll pull out what and pair it with what?
It's funny because my wife doesn't really drink that much, but
there you go.
I like to kind of make my food based on what I want to drink. So I'll cook. I actually think my style of Pinot or Gamay from Beaujolais go really well with tartare. So I eat a ton of tartare actually.
And make your own tartare?
Yeah,
beef tartare?
Yeah, beef. We do.
Wow.
I'm pretty into cooking. So
good for you.
Yeah.
All right, favorite. Let's see if you can answer this two ways because it would help. Favorite wine restaurant and or bar. So let's do two answers. Let's do New York because, this is an important market. You're in and out of here. And I have no friggin' idea about the Finger Lakes, but you'll give me a Finger Lakes. Yeah, so give me your favorite. Give me a good wine bar restaurant in New York that does food and wine service well.
One of the best meals and experience I've had lately was Rebelle for brunch.
Okay.
And it's half off bottles.
Comes up a lot.
So great. And then I really love the food at the Four Horsemen.
In Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Great place.
That's really...
Both of them are great wine places, wine people.
Yeah.
Rebelle has a 1-star Michelin chef.
Yeah.
Four Horsemen's Daniel Eddy. Four Horsemen's not far behind. They just had Thomas Keller cooking there a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think their food's really amazing.
Those are two good choices. Now, in the Finger Lakes, Denny's? I mean, what do you got?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think you see the change in the wines that are being made in the Finger Lakes, there's changes in the restaurants. So...
they're up in the food scene a little.
Yeah, because if we want to bring in people, they don't want to be eating Denny's.
What's your favorite place or a good place?
I like to go to if I'm in Ithaca, I go to this place called Just a Taste, which is kind of like a tapas and big wine bar. And then in Watkins Glen, a place called Graft, which is really cool.
Like a wine bar?
Yeah, it's a wine bar. It's focused on Finger Lakes wines and then local food. And then Finger Lakes Table is really cool up in Geneva.
Good choices. And I'm sure you're right on those. All right, so favorite all-time wine. What's the wine? Is it a birth wine? Is it the first wine you tasted with one of your winemaker guys? Is it something you went, to an event?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. There's a lot of wines that stick out, but
You can give me a couple.
Yeah, and the one that really sticks out is going to that tasting with the winemaker and him giving me, it was a Spatlese Dr. Birkeland Wolf from 19...
So Spatlese is a type of German wine.
Yeah.
Spatalese or something.
Yeah.
Is that a sweet or a dry?
Well, that one was a little sweeter. And
who was the maker?
It was Dr. Birkeland Wolf, and this was in the mid... this was a 90s wine that I was tasting in the early 2000s.
Wine.
So that was really special. And then actually one of the wines that mattered most to me was an older bottling of oh my God, I'm going to lose it now. But Hayman Lowenstein, and it was a dry later harvest wine from the early 90s as well. And
so later harvest is usually sweet, but it was a drier?
Yeah, it was a dry style, so it was really rich, and it had all those dried aromatics that you'd expect, dried fruits and honeys and things, and then
Very
it was
cool.
Bone dry with this.
So do you ever drink Cali Cabs or Burgundy or Bordeaux?
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't brought up one red wine in an hour.
I know. I like red wine. I just like
not-
kind of love white wine.
You gravitate towards what
No,
you
but
like.
I do like some stuff that's being done. I love Burgundy, but
Right.
like
It's expensive.
I can't afford it. And I love a lot of Oregon stuff, and that's great too.
All the like when Patrick Cappiello comes in, I'm
Yeah.
going to ask him, like I've asked every other guest, how can my listeners drink Burgundy and not, pay, crazy numbers?
Yeah, I mean, you know what I think? If you do Bourgogne Rouge,
Bourgogne
that's
Rouge,
one way. And then if you
Cru
go
Beaujolais.
you go to Cru Beaujolais, yeah, because nobody
That's what comes up.
And then the other thing is too, like some of the outer regions, like Côte de Chalonnaise and Irancy. Irancy is awesome for me, and there's more acid in Irancy than there is in.
That's the way to drink
Yep.
it cheap. All right, this is one of my favorite questions. My son Ben is sitting here. He's going to a party. He's bringing a couple of bottle of wines, and you may be able to handle this pretty well. Give me your best wine around $15 retail. Give me a white. Give me a red.
For white,
First of all, you brought a rosé that's $19.
Yeah.
So that's not way off. So that's what I'm thinking.
yeah, I mean
But
everybody
give
loves
me-
rosé, right?
Okay, so we'll.
So rosé, but I was gonna say Beaujolais Blanc,
White Beaujolais.
white Beaujolais Chardonnay,
$15,
15 to $20 easy.
on the white side.
Yeah,
I think
and-
that's the first time anybody's ever said a Beaujolais Blanc.
Yeah, and a lot of people are really getting into those now, and I really love them.
All right, so give me a red now.
Red's hard because I drink
is
post-mid Pinot. Let's do a red grape and then
That's
make
fine.
it a rosé.
Because a lot of people say Muscadet
Yeah,
because it's a good food wine. There's some good makers. Some people. So give me a red. Give me a grape.
I would just get anything like I would get a Pinot Noir, a Cab Franc. Honestly, I'm going to go back to Finger Lakes too because I think those are like absurdly affordable.
Good values.
Yeah,
Okay.
rosés.
All right, last question, and this one's specific to you. Who else is making good wines in the Finger Lakes? If you had to give a shout out
Yeah.
to some either friends or guys doing it right, give me a couple other makers.
Everybody's going to be like, what? Why didn't you say my name? But I think Weimer, they've been really
They've been
inspirational to
around.
me.
That's a fair answer.
And I think beyond that, Nathan Kendall, Ian Barry, both their names are on there.
Smaller guys like you.
And
Right.
Chris Bates as well. I think he's making some interesting stuff. Gloomer Creek.
So with the old, there's new, there's large, there's small, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, those are all good choices. We're going to move to our weekly wine sip. Every week we taste a different wine on air. For our weekly wine sip, Chris was nice enough. I asked him to bring down one wine. He brought 3 down. So we're going to start with a 2014 Sawmill Creek Vineyard Dry Riesling, one of his best, one of his favorite wines. The wine retails, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, for around $23.
Yep.
You can get it at better restaurants, at a restaurant price, of course. And, there's some cool wine stores that carry it. Chris also has a mailing list. This particular wine, I think, is sold out.
Yeah.
But if anyone is interested in Bellwether wines and wants to get on a mailing list or find out more, where do they go?
They could go to bellwetherwinecellars.com
Okay.
or they could just go to cidery.com and just write us. And
So Bellwether is BELLWETHER.
Yeah.
Bellwether.com. And Cidery, which is, we talked a little
Yep.
about, CIDERY.
That's correct.
.com and all that. So if you're interested in more information on the wines and all that. All right, so Chris, we're going to start with the 2014 Sawmill Creek Vineyard. Let's give it let's look at it first. So it's pretty pale colored. It's not very hued. It's
No.
It's pretty, I wouldn't say clear, but light yellow. Give me some descriptors on the nose.
This is really hard because it's my own wine.
Well, you better.
You got a little minerality. You have some touching on stone fruit, and then you have a lot of palm fruit. So like apple quince, and then you're getting into a little bit of like the white peach and things like that.
Which are somewhat classic Riesling descriptors.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
nothing out of the ordinary that you brought up, right?
No, I mean, and then I think for this one too, minerality, a little chalkiness on it, particularly on the palate.
So let's throw it over the tongue. I think right away you get that acidity.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, not effervescent, but you can feel it on the tongue.
Yeah.
It's got a good medium mouth feel. Give me some palate descriptors.
I think this is one of those wines where the nose carries onto the palate, and then I think you get like the same fruit, but you get more lingering texture on the wine and a little different weight than I think you'd expect from the nose. You expect a little lighter.
Yeah,
a little
the weight
more,
is great.
Yeah,
it definitely lingers a little,
and a little bit of chalkiness on it. I think that's a good thing, and minerality as well.
What foods would you pair this wine with?
I've always thought that these like dry, austere Rieslings would go really awesome with like something like a really charred steak, because you have that kind of like minerality and charriness
and
to
acidity,
it, and acidity,
a white that could hold up to it.
And then have that like if
that's
you put,
not classic.
It's
but
not
that's
classic at all.
That's a cool pairing.
Yeah, I think it'd be really cool with like a steak with like a béarnaise sauce with this wine.
This would hold up. It would
hold up. Yeah, I would be pretty psyched about that.
All right, so that is the 2014. I keep throwing my New York accent in. 14. 2014 Sawmill Creek Vineyard Dry Riesling. Now let's try. We've been drinking the Pinot. We'll come back to that, but let's try the rosé.
Okay.
Now, have you been making rosé from the beginning, Kris?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
We rosé was something I always wanted to do, and it was about our third year in we made rosé.
And it's rosé from Pinot grapes,
it's
right?
Pinot Noir rosé. It's acre contracted. It's completely handpicked, intentionally picked for rosé, and then made a little more simply, so it ferments a little quicker in bottles.
So this is a 2016 rosé of Pinot Noir.
Yeah,
it's about $19, which is a great value retail. All right, let's give it a sniff. It's got a faint pale pink color.
Yeah.
It's a very aromatic nose. It's aromatic, but I need you to tell me what I'm smelling.
So for me, with this wine, you get like a lot of strawberry, a lot of kind of curranty, cranberry type fruit, but
very red,
and not like a super dark red, but kind of like in between there, and.
Not plummy or black cherry, but the red raspberry,
cherry, strawberry, like what you want in a rosé, really. Yeah. And then, you get a little bit of that. There's some carbonic on there as well, which nobody does, and
for sure, which I like.
Yeah, and I think that lifts
good acidity,
it up.
Yeah. It's dry, and what am I trying to say? There's a sweetness to it that's not. Annoying. I mean, the fruit is nice and sweet and all that, but it's dry and it's got that acidity and all.
Exactly. I think you want rosé that has like really bright, vibrant, like present fruit, basically.
So on the palate, I'm getting the same stuff. I'm getting red fruit, strawberries. What else?
Again, I think on the palate you get a little bit of like this greenness on the palate. So maybe not like green like bell pepper or anything like that, but green like some herbs and spices more so. And those are coming from some of the stem inclusion on the carbonic portion of it.
So it's full stem and clusters, or
I always like try to make a simple rosé, and then I can't do anything simple. So there's some cluster carbonic, and then there's some just regular, just pressed off really quick.
We could do a whole show on your cockamamie wine procedures and lose everybody and all of that.
Yeah.
How long have you been making the rosé?
So we've been doing rosé we did it 3 of the past 4 years. We just couldn't get the fruit one year, and I sell out almost upon release of it. So
I would say, because I've drank a lot of rosé, I would say it's a terrific rosé. Love the nose, love the acidity. It's not a super dry rosé, even though it has some dryness, because I think the fruit comes out. So if you like that kind of style, I mean, it's a home run anyway, but, rosés vary. All right, so the last wine Kris brought in, we basically drank the bottle, and Dave and Vitor, our engineers, basically took a straw and finished it up. But they should come in and get some rosé, too. We tasted the rosé, which is a very finessed, restrained, not the rosé, the Pinot Noir. It's let's talk about color. It's pale for a rosé.
Yeah.
But it's got the body.
Yep.
Talk to me about the nose.
So the Pinot Noir is like the most complicated one out of all the wines.
It's the most finicky grape,
it's
right?
Super hard, and there's a ton of work. But for me, you kind of get these, again, you get more light red fruits and nice acidity. On the nose, there's a lot of stem inclusion, so you get...
The nose changed since we
it's
poured
probably
it.
opened up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's much richer and more open and all of that.
So the nose is, again, strawberry, red raspberry, currants, things like that, I think. And then you get a little bit of this, like, kind of foresty, bourgeois, like forest floor stuff and mushroom as well. And then
it does have those.
Yeah,
there's a complexity there and all of that. So the Pinot Noir is like the Riesling. It's a Sawmill Creek vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
It's more costly as far as the other wines, but Pinot Noir falls in that. It's about $32, which for this wine is a great value at retail. And you can get it in restaurants. Kris and I, we do the show right here from Roberta's, and Roberta's through the years has supported Bellwether, and it's a bunch of other restaurants. What are some of the other restaurants that...
honestly, like... I'm kind of embarrassed by it, but we've been very successful in New York City, and I'm very proud of that.
So don't be. You'll find Bellwether at the cooler, restaurants.
Yeah, we've. It's been crazy. It's beyond my wildest dreams how people have embraced us, basically.
Well, we're glad to hear that. All right, we're going to thank you for coming on. We're going to wrap up, Kris. If you have a question, a wine happening or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's Sam at The Grape Nation. Follow us on Facebook, The Grape Nation. Follow us on Instagram at @SBenRuby. And follow us on Twitter at BenRuby without the S. We want to thank our guest, Kris Mattewson from Bellwether Winery in the Finger Lakes up in New York State. We want to thank our engineer, Vitor, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. Kris, before we leave, I just want to go back and say that if anybody wants more information on Bellwether, they go to bellwether.com.
BellwetherWineCellars.com.
BellwetherWineCellars.com or Cidery, CIDE.
That's correct. Yep.
DERY.
Yeah, I know, right?
And you'll get all the information. If you're smart, because of this show, you'll go on the website, get on the mailing list, and whatever's left you can grab. And down the road, maybe you'll be at the top of the list.
I'll be the guy answering all the emails, too. So.
Yeah, Kris is he's like a jack of all trades. So, Kris, thank you for making the trip down. Thank you for enlightening us about Finger Lakes wines. Thank you for enlightening us about your project. And thank you for giving us a chance to taste everything. Everything was great. I'm Sam BenRuby, and you have been listening to The Grape Nation.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.